All right, welcome everybody to January 2023. We are going to do some good conversation on goal setting and setting some intention for this new year. So welcome to Monarch Family Chiropractic's Spinal Workshop on the 10th of January, starting the new year. So we are going to go through some components of, before we get into goal setting, kind of really talking about what when you're doing goals and you want to achieve something, I think it's really important to talk about where it comes from and what do we care about, what creates a habit of something that is going to allow a choice we make or a goal we set to come to fruition and us to be able to carry that all the way through. So there's different data here about how, and tons of research on, creating a habit. We talk about when you do something repetitively, right? It creates a pattern, creates a change in your brain, a change in your neurology, and a change in the little literal cells and axons firing to your body understanding a behavior, right? So more than 40% of actions that people take performed each day weren't actual decisions, but habits, right? So we can get into things like we talk about when the nervous system is in a pattern and our brain understands a pattern, we can do some things without feeling like we're literally thinking, right? When you're on autopilot and we talk about how you get from point A to point B, maybe your garage to the grocery store or work, when you do it repetitively, becomes a habit and it's almost like you're not even thinking about it. So we want to talk about that. We want to talk about habits and choices, I feel like, in a way, because that is, at some point we stop thinking about what it is we're doing. And that isn't necessarily a great thing all the time, right? So habits aren't always great, right? We can form bad habits as well. So at one point when we're consciously deciding this is how we want to eat, this is what we want to focus on, this is what we want to do, this is what we want to achieve, this is the goal we want to set. There has to be intention behind that, and it has to be out of choice and a behavior that's not so automatic. And eventually it can get that way, but it takes practice to do that. So many times when we set goals or someone sets a resolution, I'm not a big fan of that word because there's got to be more behind it, right? That drives us to set that intention and what's the outcome, and what has to change in order for that goal to be achieved. So I think it's worth looking at those components so that you set yourself up for success. So when we talk about habits and how they're created, think about, again, like we talk about a lot with the body and the nervous system, is it's like a layer. The brain is got layers upon layers of patterns in cellular development that an outside layer, right, is the most recent things that maybe have happened or evolved, our perspective from where the most complex thinking occurs, right? Deeper inside the brain, you're going closer to the brainstem. That is older, more primitive behaviors, right? So our breath, swallowing, initial responses like the startle response, you'll see even in a brand new baby, right? So those kinds of things, very primitive, is a deeper level of the brain. So at the center of the skull, kind of more of those components where things begin. And so when we're trying to make a change or create a new pattern or habit and achieve something, it's really worth looking at this loop or these steps. So there's cues that trigger your brain to go into an automatic mode. And again, which is a habit. Routine can be multiple forms of routine, right? Physical routine, a mental routine, emotional routine. And then the reward of that, right? There's something in our brain that goes, oh, good thing, oh, bad thing, right? Or reward, or like in a sense, reward or a consequence. So it helps your brain figure out of this particular loop, is it worth remembering in the future, right? So we create a good pattern, a good habit, a good outcome. There's some reward of some type, right? At the end of that literal loop of information. So over time, that becomes more automatic. So when we do repetition and we talk about even just the repetition of your adjustments, the repetition of eating well, the repetition of exercising or stretching, all those things are to create that more automatic loop and a better pattern for a good end result and an outcome. So the cue or reward kind of becomes intertwined with until you have that sense of like anticipation, or in a sense, the craving of something, right? Or wanting to do something comes from that. So goes into a little bit more detail of a cue, a reward, and a habit. And this is kind of where I was alluding to that the habits are very powerful in the sense of a delicate balance of, we want that to be a conscious habit, so that, and very deliberate, so that it's not something that's necessarily a bad or a poor habit for our body to get into. Rewards also, what's the power of a habit is, what is that reward system? What drives us? What's the payoff, right? Is it a feeling? Is it a sense of accomplishment? Is it a sense of something else? So a sensation, right? That could change somebody. The reward is food, or versus an emotional reward, feeling of, pride, or I've accomplished something. Let's see if there's anything I didn't necessarily cover that's on the slide. But really looking at how habits really, shape our lives, shape our, what we realize and the way in which we do things. It's a very strong thing for the brain to get to a point of having a habit. So we want to look at what makes sense there. And when you're looking at a cue, what is the cue? And is it a healthy cue? Things that trigger us are our cues, right? So that can be something that's very physical. That could be something, again, emotional, that triggers a different type of cue, sequence of things happening, or a person. So I think understanding those and knowing what those are help you either create a more successful pattern or catch a non-successful pattern, right? A not healthy cue or not healthy habit. So where do we start? Essentially, we want to get a clarity of what is it our goal is, right? So seeking clarity for engagement, right? Growth, fulfillment, and again, over the long haul, not necessarily a short term. Now, I think short-term and long-term goals are great. We should have a bunch of both. And there's differences to what that outcome is for a long haul goal, right? Than a short-term one. So who you are, what you want, how you get it, like the meaning behind it, and create that fulfillment of what those things are for you for that goal is, I think, how we're going to see achievements happen, and then the sustainability of that goal being reached or continued. So how does it relate to the different categories that we might set a goal for? And we're going to go a little deeper into those categories there. There's a lot of research. There's a lot of literature. There's a lot of books. There's a lot of people with PhDs that have written very great books as how to create habits, what habits very successful people have, and the commonalities there. So those are a couple lists of things of books and some titles there that you can certainly research if that's something that you feel like, I want deeper level of information of how to create healthier habits, or habits in certain categories of life. And as we were just talking about, there's a cue for every habit. So those are the 5 main ones that we were alluding to a few slides ago, but location, time, an emotional state, or another person, right? So other people, and an immediately preceding action. So when we talk about the areas of a balanced life and an area where we might want to focus goals, these are areas that I think it's worth looking at where your focus is right now. And it might be different a few months from now. But at the beginning of the year, what are the areas of life that you feel you want to set goals towards? So this might be a great place to start if you're still kind of searching of like how to set some. So even though it's third on the list, most people that you would do any research with or read any books on will say that spiritual is actually the top. from the sense of what is your life's purpose, right? If a goal, if a thing you want to achieve doesn't have some purpose behind it, it's usually not a sustained goal or something that we feel like we reach. So there's got to be, a component of value or principle to attach that purpose to. So I feel like whatever your, in a sense, higher power is, or, vertical relationship is, it's got to have a purpose for you and for your life. So however you want to use that word that drives you, in that component of setting a goal and having balance. Obviously physical goals, it could be energy, it could be strength, it could be to create endurance. Setting a goal even to do a marathon versus somebody who is, I'm going to change my diet to get off my diabetes medication because I know I can control more of that. We could name a bazillion examples there of how changing either physical health or doing something along those components is huge goals for people at the beginning of the year, is redirecting some of those components. And from the sense of mind, some people may say from an intellectual standpoint, like my goal is to study something new, learn a new language, pick up a new activity. And that could be something like reading a book a month. That could be learning to play an instrument. I mean, a gazillion things, right? It could fall in those different categories, but how it changes our mind or how it may challenge our mind to learn something new. So it's a desire to learn in that sense when someone's got a more intellectual goal. And then relationships or social, again, more from the sense of our either biological or what we call chosen family, right? Where do you want to spend your time with, and what is that like when, from the relationship perspective or your social engagement? So this was talked about a lot post-COVID, right? And during COVID, when people were not engaging socially very much, or at a much bigger distance than being together. So I think that people are setting goals, setting vacations, traveling, kind of getting back to things that we didn't do for a couple years. That may, people's level of balance was not very balanced for a couple years there in those categories. So I think it's worth looking at, where do you want to set goals and set habits for maybe changing relationship components in your world. And then, work, career, financial. Is there achievements that you have that you want to set as a goal? And is it more to do with output or productivity to achieve something in your career or at a financial state of a goal? So all little components of setting a goal there, that would be a great place of focus. So when we talk about creating a habit and setting the goals, I think it's really key that we talk about when setting, how to do something consistently that allows you to achieve that and sets those habits in place, those good habits in place, and does it consistently over a period of time to create, again, that neural pattern change in the brain and starts creating the, in a sense, healthier habit. And so obviously sitting down and writing down what those, where you fall in those categories we just talked about and where a goal might be. Here's an example of some steps or some things in relation to our health that look at it in small chunks. So if over a period of a handful of minutes a day, but for a full 30 days, for a full month, we know that doing things, at least hearing things and doing things at least hearing something, doing something 3 times, hearing something 10 times, the brain starts to remember that, change that pattern, commit those things into that deeper level of the brain, right? That memory. And so that cortex of the brain. So steps of, I'm going to drink X amount of water. I'm going to spend 5 minutes in reflection, or 5 minutes of reading a book or something meditative the first part of my day. I'm going to spend 5 minutes in yoga poses that really support my body. Adding in 5 different things, and then again, to support that goal over a 30-day period is really locking in that healthy habit or that good habit. Again, for whatever the habit is, or whatever the goal is. So I think it's looking at those different components of setting a goal, those different categories, I guess, and then picking things that support that goal is a great way to take a bigger thing and chunk it down into smaller things, right? So if we can do some of those consistent steps for a consistent amount of days, then that's really where you're going to see not just a goal come to fruition, but a habit created to where the goal is attainable and sustainable too. So again, we could pick up multiple types of examples depending on what the goal is. I think it's about figuring out, when you look at what those things are in the categories, how do we break that down into something smaller? So that was one example to pull. We are, of course, going to talk about how your intent, if it is to improve brain function, then the neurological pattern has to change, right? We have to have better organization from brain through nervous system to body, and that coherence. So for any change of pattern to happen at the brain and cellular level to create a healthy habit, we've got to have a healthy brain and function and nervous system. So again, with why you do what you do and why you're on this call is because you understand that component. You're seeing your body change in that sense of brain, either mapping or function, and its ability to adapt and respond to a different behavior, right? So we can improve and change habits in a much easier way when we have a healthier brain, nervous system, and function in our bodies. So all of what we're here to support you doing. So what we are challenging you to do here at Monarch Family Chiropractic is to, you hand me a goal sheet by chance, Paige, is to do 2 things. We're going to start with this year time frame. Sit down and just kind of envision goals and dreams. And we're going to ask you to come up with 100 of them. So here's our sheet at the office. We'll have possibly this posted when the workshop gets posted on YouTube. But these are here in the office. If you want to grab one, you don't need a sheet from here. You can write your 100 out in your own notebook, in your journal, and in wherever it is that suits you. But putting together what that looks like. And I say, to write 100 is a lot. It's a stretch, right? And they, again, can be very mini, small, things that seem small, and things that I want you to dream big as far as, I guess I should say, not set limitations to whether you think it can happen or be achievable. Like, do not limit yourself. If no obstacles were there, what are those things? What are those things that are the short-term versus long-term goals, and whether it feels attainable or not? And I know we have some stuff posted here in the office this week, but writing out a letter is something that's suggested in a lot of the books talking about goal setting, is in a sense, write a letter to your future self. And in our instance here, it would be taking this list of however many you come up with. We're going to challenge you to 100, ourselves included, and give that, if you want to give that to us back in the office. And a year from now, we're going to put it in an envelope. We're going to address it, and we're going to mail it to you next January. And it's amazing to see when you put your intention of what you want to accomplish there, how much of that you actually do, and how much of that you actually finish and attain. Now, again, it comes with breaking things down and figuring out where that good habit is to create that goal. But it's kind of where do you want it to be? What dreams do you want? A status of XYZ, right? What is that you're trying to achieve in the big picture? So you can write something a little bit more specific to yourself versus just the list of 100. The 2 examples that I pulled were, really writing a letter for the time frame. They all recommend starting at a year, and easier to kind of envision goals, and also gives you kind of a comfortable time frame to take action, right? Some things we might do this week, some things we might do in 5 months. Referencing today's date, where do you want to be a year from now? What are the goals or dreams that you want realized by then? What are the desired status of those areas of life, right? So is it career? Is it business? Is it money? Is it family? Is it friends? Is it a health goal, health change? Is it something more spiritual? Is it something more in contribution, right? To your community, to your family, to a different purpose. And then when you're done, sign that, date it for when you write it or finish it, and then seal it in that envelope. And you're addressing it to yourself. If you bring them into the office, we will do that for you and send them to you. I've also seen another option where you're dividing kind of that letter into 2 parts. So professional and personal is another way you could do this, just to give you guys some ideas and some food for thought. The steps that they recommended was to do kind of your current mood or your current state of affairs. So how are you feeling? What's happening in your life right now? Are there any fears that would demotivate you, or motivations that you have to make a goal and to achieve it? And then questions for your future self. So is there anything that you're challenged with now? What are the, are you curious? Are you curious almost to ask your future self X, Y, or Z? Again, setting some aspirations. What do we hope to achieve? Imagine if you wrote 100 and you still achieved 20 goals. I mean, that's amazing in a time frame versus not really setting any intention to any, right? So I think it's like, think big and you'll be astonished at what you can accomplish in a year's time frame. It also has a component about stop, start, and continue. So 3 to 5 things that you should stop doing, that you should start doing, and that you should continue doing. And I thought that was really helpful for me to hear. And that, again, if it's a habit that maybe is a better habit to stop doing versus to start doing. So sometimes to just put those out there and understand where you are there. And since you're writing it to yourself, it can look however you want it to, right? Nobody cares about grammar. Nobody cares about, spelling, all that kind of stuff. It's a letter to yourself. So I had one other component that I was going to wrap up with you. There was another great book that Doc had referenced in a previous lecture or workshop. And it was called, for those of you that ask for things like that, The Miracle Equation by Hal Elrod, E-L-R-O-D. And some things that I pulled out of his excerpt was, and if he kind of was giving tips of the most effective way to read the book and to kind of establish these goals and patterns and looking at where you want to dive in there. And it just talked about how to overcome an internal conflict between limitations that we all suffer from limiting ourselves and what our belief system is of what we can accomplish. And your innate limitless potential. So just looking at those things and not, in a sense, tapering this list because you think you can't achieve something. So just kind of trying to take the limitations off and just put things down, just write them down. How to develop an emotional invincibility so that you remain in control of your emotions no matter what life throws at you. And then kind of the real purpose of setting a goal, things we talked about, again, making sure it's purpose driven so that it's attainable and it's something we stick with. How to choose kind of the first and then subsequent miracles or goals, how to keep creating them over and over again, right? So doing something and then repeating that healthy pattern and habit, and then putting all that information into practice with your own kind of equation. So starting a path to create the very first tangible, measurable thing. So for some people, you need to kind of backtrack of how am I going to get to that goal? So hopefully this gives you just some good areas to look at where you want to focus, and how you want to start creating your list, and some other tools and resources to maybe help you dive down the path of more support in setting a goal. If that's a piece that this is something you haven't done before, haven't done in a long time, or haven't done at this capacity. So to wrap up, we'd love to see your 100 goals. We're all going to do ours. If you want us to seal them up for you and send them to you in a year, please bring them here to the office. We would like them by February, I think 8th or 9th is what we put down. So in a sense, a month from now. And then we will be supporting you along that process. So I hope this gave you some idea of where you want to start, and just maybe some kickstart of thought to what purpose and intention you want to set for 2023. We love having all of you on here and supporting you from the health perspective that we get to, and watching you grow. So thank you for joining us for Goals 2023 workshop at Monarch Family Chiropractic. We will see you all in the office soon, and look forward to seeing what your desire and your purpose and intention that you set for 2023 brings you. See you soon. Bye-bye.
100 goals. That's like